In Genesis chapter 50 from verse 15 to 22, Genesis 50 from verse 15 to 22, the brothers of Joseph came to him after their father died. And they said, we know we wronged you. Now we are your servants. Have pity on us, even though our father is dead. Don't now come and revenge. Joseph said, you thought you were doing me evil, but you were pushing me towards my destiny. The purpose God created me was only fulfilled through your activities. I should be thanking you. If you had not sold me into slavery, how will I have gotten to Egypt? How will I be prime minister now? In Exodus chapter 3, from verse 1 to 15, Exodus 3, 1 to 15, it became clear to Moses, after he had been alive for 80 years, that the purpose of him being born was to deliver a nation. When you read Joshua chapter 1 from verse 1 to 8, Joshua chapter 1 from verse 1 to 8, it became clear to Joshua, I was born to complete the work of Moses. Where Moses failed, I'm to succeed. But the case of Joshua will show you something interesting about this thing called destiny. You will remember that when Moses sent some spies to go and spy the land, you can read that in Numbers chapter 13, and read verse 17 to 30, Numbers 13, from verse 17 to 30. And the 12 spies came back, and 10 said, we can't take the land. The Bible tells us there were only 2 that said, yes, we can take the land. But read that Numbers 13, from verse 17 to 30, clearly. You will discover that that first night, it was Caleb who spoke. It was Caleb who said, yeah, we can take the land. Joshua was quiet. It was only the second day, Numbers chapter 14. Read it from verse 1 to 10. Numbers 14, from verse 1 to 10. It was only later that Joshua spoke and said, yes, we can take the land. So if God was to choose a successor to Moses, should it be Joshua? Why not Caleb? He was the first one to speak. He was the first one to say, if the Lord is on our side, we can do it. Joshua kept quiet at first. But there's something called destiny. And then look at 2 people called Aaron and Hur. Exodus chapter 17, from verse 8 to 13. Exodus 17, 8 to 13. When Moses was on the mountain top at the battle of the Amalekites, there were 2 people who were lifting up his hands, Aaron and Hur. And yet, in Exodus chapter 40, from verse 12 to 13, Exodus 40, 12 to 13, it was Aaron who was now chosen to be the high priest. Aaron and his children. Where was Hur? And when you look at Luke chapter 8, from verse 1 to 3. Luke chapter 8 from verse 1 to 3. Do you know that among those people who were named as the divine treasurers of the day of the Lord Jesus Christ was a woman called Mary Magdalene, out of whom the Lord had to cast out 7 demons so that she can become what God planned for her to be, a divine treasurer. And then there were some people that were not even named, who are children of destiny. 2 Kings chapter 5 from verse 1 to 19. 2 Kings 5 from verse 1 to 19. The Bible tells us that in the house of Naaman, there was a maid, a housemaid. When you read that story, you will say, oh, okay, the housemaid was born to bring healing to Naaman. Oh, that's wonderful. But she did much more. Because after Naaman got healed, and he brought gifts to Elisha, and Elisha refused the gifts, he said to Elisha, give me some soil. I'm taking the presence of your God to my country. I'm going there to build an altar. From this moment onward, I will only serve your God. That's the purpose for which that little girl was born. Or then look at John chapter 6 from verse 5 to 13. John 6 from verse 5 to 13. The Lord was in need. He wanted to feed a lot of people. And the Bible said there was a lad there. They did not give us his name. He surrendered his meal. And with the meal, the Lord fed 5,000 people. And there were left over. That boy was born to be around when God is going to be in need. What's your purpose? Why were you born? Because we see here in the story of Elisha here that he was farming, whereas the purpose of God for him was to become the father of kings, not a farmer. 2 Kings chapter 13 from verse 14 to 21. 2 Kings 13, 14 to 21. Oh, by the time he was about to die and he fell sick, the king came and said, my father, my father. King called him father. Are you farming when God is expecting you to fulfill a purpose so mighty that kings will be calling you father? Or look at Luke chapter 5 from verse 1 to 11. Luke 5 from verse 1 to 11. Peter was fishing for fish. But God created him to fish for souls. What's God's purpose for your life? Very, very serious question that we need to ask. Particularly as the time is going. You need to know God's purpose for your life before it is too late. I've told you before, my driver came to me one day and said, Daddy, I have found my purpose. I believe God created me to drive you, take you to wherever you are going, so that you can preach the gospel to them. That's my purpose. He said, Daddy, you may not know this, but as soon as I take you there, as you begin to preach, I begin to pray. What's your purpose? Because there are people who are tailoring when God's purpose for them is to be a barber. You say scissors is scissors. One scissors is for barbing, the other is for cutting clothes.